witness. Can she testify
Okay.
from here?
And I'm sorry, I have totally forgotten one thing, which is at the top of my list. If anyone wants to, is going to testify here today, either for or against the case, could you please stand and raise your right hand and take the oath?
Why don't you all stand just in case we don't have to do it again?
Okay, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Very good, you can be seated. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Call Ashley Hall as my first witness. May she testify from her seat here?
Absolutely, and make sure that you state your name, address, and occupation, and spell for the record your last name.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Ashley Hall. My address is 7600 Tremaine Place, Unit 111 in McLean, Virginia, 22102. I am partner at a accounting firm. The name of the firm is Witham, Smith & Brown. Was that all the, is there anything I missed?
I think it was it. Spell your last name, H-A-L-L, correct?
Yes, H-A-L-L.
And A-S-H-L-E-I-G-H is your first name, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. Now, would you tell the board, Ashley, a little bit about how you came to own this property and who the owners are? I mean, it's listed as Orendorff LLC, correct?
Yes.
What is Orendorff LLC? What does that consist of?
So Orendorff Holdings LLC is owned by my mom, Sandy Hall, and by my sister and her family. That's Luke and Whitney Klosek. And so they are the sole members of Orendorff Holdings that then own the real estate.
And how how are you involved? And you have another brother or sister, don't you?
Yes, correct.
And how are they involved in the enterprise?
Yes, so I am listed officially as a resident agent, I believe that's what it's called, for Orendorff, acting as an administrator of sorts for that entity. As far as when we and here to talk about the conditional use of the property as a cottage inn provision, that business would operate under a separate LLC that has other members, of which the entire family is both invested and part of managing. So that is where then we also include my brother and his wife, Caleb and Rachel Hall, who are here today and will be involved in the country inn.
So to summarize, a couple members of the family are going to be the owners of the real estate, and the remainder of the family, plus maybe some additional people, will be the operators of the enterprise. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Describe the process that resulted in your family's purchase of the property and plans for the country inn.
Yeah, so we grew up on small family business in a rural setting is our life. My dad started his businesses when he was in college and had 3 by the time he passed about 5 years ago. And when I was a small child, my parents bought a property up in northern Maryland, northern Frederick County, where it was 9 acres nestled in farmland where my dad's businesses operated and we lived. Our home was a 1741 historic stone house, which was beautiful. And so that was just really a dream for us to grow up in. So my dad passed, we sold the businesses about 2 years later, and the properties went with it. And so we then moved into our respective homes in suburbia. And since then, we just have always wanted to get back into a rural setting. We just really missed being on a farm, in the farmland, and in a rural countryside setting.
So you started to look for property.
Yes. So we started to really, while that itch existed for many years, we really started to seriously look for a property at the beginning of 2020. And then, of course, the real estate market being what it was, we actually didn't come across this property, or this is really the first property that we fell in love with until May or late April of 2021. So the property popped up in my sister Whitney's searches, and we were on site the next day to see it and instantly fell in love. So it's a 33 acre property with a manor home built by John Orendorff, so that's the reason for the name, in 1861, and the grounds are immaculate. It has been lovingly preserved for generations by those who have owned it for the past 150 years. And it's got the manor house that has a small rancher and a really beautiful barn with a few little outbuildings.
And the house or the farm is on the National Register of Historic Places, is it not?
Yes, it is.
All right. And during this process or before this process, you were also formulating plans for a country inn, is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So one of the challenges with the property, we loved it so much, it just needs modernization and renovations to get it up to current living. That obviously comes with some financial impacts, and so as we looked for ways to both help make this dream a reality and to restore this beautiful home and property to its original glory, but then also to provide opportunities for others to enjoy it and love it like we do, that's where the idea for the Country Inn was really born from. And so at that point, we, dug into that idea. We did an extensive viability analysis. Our business plan is over 80 pages, where we did an in-depth market research. Is this, viable given where we are situated? Our primary market would be the Baltimore market, a little bit of Washington. And then we just really think it could really benefit Carroll County and Westminster by bringing clientele up this way.
Okay, now, the board has in its file a drawing that you've had prepared by DDC.
Yes.
But can you just generally describe the portions of the property that would be used for the Country Inn operation?
Yes. So the Country Inn, the guest room and bed and breakfast would be in the manor home. There's a bed, a guest room there, and so we would provide overnight facilities and food, also breakfast. Our primary, we would like to be able to use it for wedding events and venues, use the property for that. And so we see that being, ceremony sites would be outside. We'd like to, for the reception and for an indoor alternative for ceremonies, ideally we'd love to use our bank barn, which is just a beautiful, really structurally sound building. If there's if there's any concerns about that, we could also do a tent, which is another option. The site plans that we did submit do show a pad for a tent. To be honest, that's not our first choice because we would prefer not to disrupt any land any more than we have to.
So it's not your first choice, but it's on there because as of this point in time, you do not know what would be involved in bringing that bank barn into a situation where it would allow events to be held, right?
Yes.
And so if that were to prove undoable or financially not feasible, you would then go to the tent option. Is that what you're
Correct.
testifying to?
Correct.
Now, I think you mentioned, but I want to emphasize, you will have one room available in the manor house for the bride and groom to stay overnight, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. And let's go through the checklist in section 158-071-D7 of the county code for country inns. The individual rooms which are rented by paying occupants will not contain cooking facilities, correct?
Correct. No cooking facilities.
Okay. The manager must reside, well, the property will be owner occupied, correct?
Yes.
And furthermore, the manager will reside on the premises,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
The parking will be provided in accordance with the provisions of the code, right?
Yes.
You will not serve meals to anybody that's not a customer, correct?
Correct.
Right. You are asking for the ability to provide facilities and catering for banquets, weddings, receptions, reunions, and similar one-day events, correct?
Correct.
And those events will not be open to the public, will they?
No.
Okay. Your property you just testified exceeds 3 acres in size.
Yes.
It's 30-some acres?
It's 33.
33. And the sign that you would want to use would not be in excess of 2 feet by 3 feet in area, correct?
Correct.
You're not, I didn't ask, you're not planning on illuminating that sign, are you?
No.
Okay. Or at least it wouldn't be
It-
neon.
it-
It may have a light that shows it.
Maybe a floodlight.
Okay. Thank you. Now, let me show you what's been marked for identification as Exhibit 1. What does that show?
That's the bank barn.
Okay.
That was taken last summer.
I'll ask you about all the photos later. Should I just hand this up here?
Yes. And then at the conclusion, we'll go ahead and accept those into evidence.
Okay, thank you.
You can do them all at once, Mr. Schaefer, instead of one at a
Here's,
time.
here's what's been marked for Exhibit 2. What's that show?
That's also the bake barn. So the first picture shows the other side. This is actually the bake barn. The bank. You can see
The
here's
bank part of the
bank.
bank barn.
Right, exactly.
That's the other side of the bank,
Right.
correct?
Yes,
All
correct.
right, now, Exhibit 3, the photograph is Exhibit 3. What's that show?
Exhibit 3 is from the corner of the manor house.
Exhibit 4, what's that show?
This is the interior lobby from the front door, and it shows the foyer, and then to the left, the picture is actually a hand-painted drawing, or hand painting from mid-1900s of the property, actually.
Now, is Exhibit 4 show the property the way you found it?
Yes, all
So, now and the rest of the house was also well-kept, is that correct?
very well kept.
But it does require some upgrading,
Yes,
correct?
it does.
And are you currently in the process of upgrading?
We are.
And were these photos taken by you or someone in your family?
Yes,
And were they taken within the last 6 months?
they were taken end of last summer.
In the last summer? And did they
So-
fairly and accurately depict the situations you testified to?
Yes.
I know you've already said, but I'll offer these
We'll-
into evidence.
We will go ahead and accept those, all of the exhibits into evidence.
Now, let's talk about the operational details of the Country Inn, if this is approved. Who will live on the property?
So it's my mom and I will, as well as my sister and her husband and family.
Okay. And you're gonna live there as your residence, correct?
Yes, yes.
And are you also gonna be part of the managers of the Country Inn?
All of us, all 6 of us will be involved. Yep.
Okay, and the other ones will commute there to help, right?
Yes.
Do you anticipate hiring any full-time employees, or will it be run pretty much by the family?
Run by the family to the extent that we need some help with maintaining the property or events. That would be part-time, independent contractors, probably.
Okay. Now, will there be, let's skip this one. Will this be a venue rental only operation?
Yes. So
And
we're-
what do you mean, explain to the board what that means to you, or what that means.
So we are only making the facilities available. We are not going to be providing food or additional services. So for when a party would rent the facilities, they get the barn or the tent and a portion of the grounds.
And then they arrange for the catering, any alcohol, music,
All of that.
any other vendors would be arranged by the customer, correct?
Yes, they will handle all of the vendors that go along with their event. We will also be providing a coordinator for every event, so that there's somebody who can help with the planning and then be dedicated on site, whether it's a family or a family member that'll act as that coordinator for the event.
Now, do you anticipate that a fair percentage of the customers will be wedding events?
Yes,
Okay. And you refer to a wedding coordinator will be provided. What's that mean?
so that means that we'll match a coordinator to the wedding party months in advance. So there'll be some preparations to, hear the vendors, who are the vendors coordinating, getting everything lined up. Then most importantly, that person will be on site for the event that day to help with navigate guests and move through the day's schedule and coordinate vendors as they come.
Will that person likely be a member of your family?
Yes,
Okay. And you will have a process where you either have an approved list of vendors or a process to vet the vendors before they're allowed to serve at your property, correct?
yes, correct. That's important to us, yep.
Now, in doing your market research, you had to decide on a price point, did you not?
Yes.
And what went into that calculation as far as your planning?
So we set our price point based on seeking to tap into a specific upscale portion of the market. Again, our market will primarily be most likely from the Baltimore area, somewhat from Washington, and we want to be a premier Country Inn facility option. So with that price comes the additional, like the dedicated coordinator, which is something that's not widespread. But yeah, I was trying to attract a specific segment of the.
Well, and you looked at, I'm sure your market study involved looked at pricing from other venues, right?
Yes. Mhm.
And you used those pricings to form yours.
Yes.
Will you provide tables and chairs for the events?
Yes, we'll provide tables and chairs, and then after that, it will be provided by the caterer that the event party has chosen. So that would include linens and silverware and the food.
And there will be a small catering kitchen available in the Manor House, correct?
We would probably put it actually as part of the barn structure.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha. Okay.
that's what
And-
we'd like it to be. As close to the reception as possible.
Okay, let's see. Got that one. Now, if you have music, or if the customer has music, you'll have requirements that they stop the music at 10 PM, correct?
Yes, correct.
And is it your understanding that, generally speaking, when the music stops, the party stops?
Yes, that is what we, in working through all this, we have consulted heavily with other wedding venue owners in our general, larger northern Maryland market. And they all say the same thing. When the music ends, everybody's been there all day, they're ready to go home.
So you're prepared to say that by 11 o'clock, it would pretty much be
Yes.
cleaned up and out of there?
Yep.
All right. If necessary, will you have contractual employees that will help with the initial parking when people arrive?
Yes.
Now, do you plan on providing, and your site plan shows, so, but I'll just get you to confirm, that you plan on putting in a bathroom facility for this use, correct?
Yes, we do. We're planning to, we're thinking it would require an additional septic field and then to put a bathhouse with a few bathrooms closer
Okay.
to the reception.
And that would be a permanent type facility, right?
Yes.
At least as of now, it's possible you would use some kind of a trailer type situation, maybe?
Maybe. Mhm.
Okay. Now, you and your mother are gonna be living in the house, right?
Correct.
So I assume one reason for that is you don't want people coming in your house to go to the bathroom,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And another reason for that is that you're aware that the county has policies regarding how many events you can have if you don't have permanent facilities, right?
Correct.
And so you do plan on having more than 12 events a year, correct?
Correct. We're planning, hoping for somewhere in 30 to 60 events for our first year, maybe growing a little bit in the years following.
Have you been made aware that this is the first step in a fairly long regulatory review process?
Yes.
And you heard Mr. Dixon read out the comments from building permits and development review, et cetera. You're aware that you're gonna have to go through those systems, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And you've consulted with DDC, Mr. Andy Stein, in advance so that the plan we presented looks like to us, would work from a regulatory standpoint, correct?
Yes.
Describe the general area that property's located in. Is that agricultural?
It is agricultural. It's really special. So the property itself, so it's 33 acres, but most of that is forest. So the main livable portion is just a few acres it's in a dell. It's in a dell, surrounded by.
You said Adele, D-E-L-L.
Right, D-E-L-L, surrounded by farmland, which is really exquisite.
And the property's, you call it a dell, I'm familiar with the word, but I didn't know, it's sort of in a bowl, is it
Yes.
not?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It is.
Now, it has a driveway that enters from, is that Frodinger Mill, or I guess they call it Old Bachman Valley there,
Yeah.
and then it turns into Frodinger Mill, I think. But of course, you're aware of the driveway, having used it, right?
Yes. Mhm.
And have you talked to the neighbor that owns the property at the front?
We have. Yes, we have talked with them.
Because there's a house right at the front of the driveway, correct?
Yeah,
Right,
we
right
share-
on Old Bachman Valley Road,
We
correct?
share the end of the driveway together, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've talked to that person, and that person indicated they were okay with your plans, right?
Oh, yeah, they're very excited, and we've talked about, what we would like to do to help them along the way, including we'd like to provide them with some additional plantings to provide some privacy, so we talked about some things we can do there, but yes.
Do you view your closest, the properties closest to the city of Westminster and to the industrial park north of the city as a benefit?
We do, yeah, we really do. Well, our location, we're 5 or 7 minutes from downtown Westminster, so we are both in very rural Carroll County in this gorgeous property surrounded by farmland, and then 5 to 7 minutes from great food and convenience. But then we were like 2 minutes from this industrial park right by the airport. So
Do you envision being would your facility be available to industries in the industrial park for retreats or meetings?
Yep, we love to make it available to them, yep.
All right, bear with me 1 second. I think that's all I have for Ms. Hall.
Okay, at this point, does anyone in the audience have any questions of Ms. Hall's testimony? And again, questions of her testimony. You'll have the opportunity for your own later. Go ahead and go to the microphone and please state your name, address, and occupation, and spell for the record your last name. And come closer to the microphone.
Good morning, Michelle Parrish, Parrish, Michelle, Michelle. My address is 969 Beggs Road. I'm here because my sister and I own the farmland that is around the industrial park side of the property. You mentioned the driveway. That's also the shared access when we harvest that property. You're aware of that? Yes. And nothing is changing you're not doing anything to the driveway that would create a situation where you talked about additional plantings, maybe for the neighbor. You're not going to narrow the driveway in any way, shape, or form that combines and tractor trailers can't get through there?
In fact, it's our understanding that the driveway would need to be widened.
Okay, and I've seen some work done, but I just wanted to clarify for the record, so,
Yep.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Ms. Hall's testimony?
I have a question.
Board members?
I have a question, Ms. Concerning the events you're planning to have over 60 a year. Currently, the zoning administrator has limited it to 12 events a year. How many
That's not accurate. The zoning administrator made a comment that if you're going to have more than 12 events a year, you need to have permanent sanitation facilities.
I
That's-
beg your pardon, Mr. Schaefer, I misread it, but I heard the comment from council about 12. The question I have then is about how many people would attend an event? What would be your maximum number?
Max would be about 170 is what we were.
170 people.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Ms. Eckert?
Anything? Thank you.
Mr. Snyder? Mr. Simmons? One question, it came up that it's a 33-acre property. Mr. Smith in his comments, I'm not, the Mr. Dixon read as part of the file. Please help me out, I'm a little confused. Is this property in ag land preservation?
A portion of it is.
Small portions of it are, and you can, if you see the drawing, you'll see that we've shown them. They are hard to see.
Okay, so I don't need to see the drawing. My question is, where the wedding venue will take place, because it is not on preserved property, agriculturally preserved property.
It is correct. It is not near any
Okay.
of the preserved property.
The driveway, heard a question from Ms. Parrish, is that wholly owned? Is that part of the 33-acre property? Or is that a right-of-way? Is it
Wholly
owned?
Mhm. Yes,
And
wholly
then-
owned.
Is part of the 33-acre property to the right of the driveway, or is that Mr. Myers's?
to the right of the driveway is Mr. Myers.
Okay, very good. That's, just wanted to get, we didn't see property lines when we went out there and visited. That's why
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
trying to get those.
No problem. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Mr. Snyder, you,
No, I was just a little confused because I thought I looked at the plan, that the driveway was a common right of way until a certain point. Is that
So
not
I
correct?
think it used to be at some point, way back, if you look, but it's not common anymore. So it is, that strip is part of our property lines, and then we do share it with the neighbors right at the bottom.
It looks like somebody has a right of way over their land. Is that maybe what you saw?
Yeah, I saw,
You saw the right of way?
so someone
Yeah.
else has
Somebody else has a right of way to use
someone
it.
else has a right of way to utilize that driveway? Is that,
It's probably the people at the end of our,
Unless you're
I believe it's
gotcha, that's what I
the
saw.
house at the end of the driveway.
okay.
They have somebody else, the neighbor has a right of way to use it to access.
Is that recorded?
Yeah,
Yes, it's recorded.
And that,
Mr.
It
Stein,
sounds-
Mr. Stein can address some of this.
when
We
he
haven't
gives
done
his
full
testimony.
title, but I believe Ms. Parrish, if I understood her correctly, you're talking about the Myers farm, right?
I'm talking about there's two separate properties, so the Myers Farm exists off, as you're driving down the driveway, it's on the right. On the left is farmland owned by my sister and I.
Okay. And I believe she was stating that she believed and had used portions of that driveway for farm access over the years, and that, my guess is, those farms enjoy an easement or right-of-way over the fee simple strip owned by Orendorff.
So it
For
is
farm
owned by.
It is owned by
Okay,
Orendorff.
okay,
Yes. And there's actually a deed reference in that right of way.
okay,
So
so,
it looks like it is recorded.
okay, very good. Ancient divisions of property and right-of-ways can cause issues, but this seems to have been legally identified. Okay. Any other questions, board members, of Ms. Hall's testimony? Thank you very much.
Next
Mr.
witness
Schaefer,
is,
would you like to call another witness?
yes, thank you. Andy Stein. You can stay here, Ashley. You're on the hook with me till this is over.
Okay, no problem.
Mr. Stein, want to remind you, state your name, address, occupation, and spell for the record your last name.
Sure. My name is Andrew Stein. Last name is spelled S-T-I-N-E. I'm a registered landscape architect with Development Design Consultants, and our business address is 192 East Main Street in Westminster, Maryland.
Andy, we're gonna put your resume into evidence, but, have you testified in front of this board as an expert witness in the area of, land design in the past?
I have on multiple occasions.
I'd like to ask him that he be quiet, if you wanna see his resume first,
No, he has testified in front of us before, and you want to enter his resume into
I'd
evidence?
like to just put it in. It's pretty impressive.
I will go ahead and accept that into evidence, and at the same time, we'll accept him as a expert witness in the fields that you will describe.
Okay, and I'm gonna describe those fields as landscape design and site design.
Okay, very good.
Andy, can you generally explain the plan you have drawn and the rationale behind it?
Yes, we met pretty early on this year in 2021 with Ashley and her family and discussed the plans for their proposed facility. And we worked with them to develop a master plan that would provide the necessary parking for the anticipated number of guests for that facility. And also, we did some preliminary environmental work, which is typically required for Board of Zoning Appeals plans, to identify all the existing natural resources on the site and make sure that any improvements that we propose respected those.
Now, Andy, explain a little bit further why you, to this board, why you did that. That is, did those environmental looks preliminarily. Because, and I'll suggest to you that it's because without those studies, you might present a plan to this board that you later find out there's no way you could do it, right?
That is correct. A lot of the environmental, there is a tributary to a stream on the back side of the property. And in Carroll County, the water resource protection easements and various other environmental easements essentially create a non-disturbance buffer. So we didn't want to come in and show any program that, as soon as we went to the site plan process, we weren't permitted to build because of the need to protect the existing waterway.
And all this costs time and money, correct?
It does.
And this will be, I don't know how you describe this, but this will be a fairly expensive process to meet the regulations here, correct?
Yes, it will be.
And if that barn can be rehabilitated, that will be a good expense too, correct?
Yes, I'm not a structural engineer, but I know it's not inexpensive.
Okay. Describe the general area that this is located in. Is this located in an agricultural zone?
It is located in an agricultural zone, and as Ashley indicated in her testimony, it's a very peaceful agricultural setting. The natural topography of the property, being down in the dell off Old Bachman Valley Road, lends it to the fact that when you're on the site and you're looking around, you don't even realize that you're only a few minutes from downtown Westminster and the adjacent industrial park.
Is this area fairly typical of a lot of the development in the ag zone in Carroll County?
The proposed program is, as far as the reuse of a agricultural structure for a event facility like this. It's something that we see happen in the county fairly regularly.
And is that because, simply put, people can't afford to continue these uses without some kind of income?
It is.
Is this, in your opinion, is this use appropriate at this location?
It is appropriate at this location. You have a perfect setting, a great setting for events, only minutes from downtown, minutes off of 140. And it's located very close to a population center that has overnight accommodations for guests, as opposed to if we were thinking of a property on the northern end of the county that wouldn't have accommodations and would put a lot more traffic on the roads to the north or on the rural back roads than this, which is really easily reached.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you the Schultz v. Pritz question. In your opinion, would the proposed use at this location have adverse effects above and beyond those adverse effects inherently associated with such a use, regardless of its location in the zone?
It would not.
Okay. And what's the basis for you saying that?
Again, it's the fact that it's topographically isolated from adjacent properties. So when you're on the adjacent roads, you can't even see the facility. Being down in the dell like that, the activities there are going to be very easy to screen. And as I indicated, it's very close to a lot of major roadways, population centers, and be very easy for people to reach, has close accommodations and restaurants, and doesn't require a lot of traffic to go beyond the city area.
Now, you've advised your client, Ms. Hall, and family that this project has to go through additional review before it could actually start operating, correct?
Correct.
And that involves those environmental codes and building codes and other things that have to get approved, correct?
Correct, the full site development plan process.
And you've also explained to Ms. Hall, and I have too, that this 12 events a year triggers a whole new set of requirements, correct?
Yes, we'd
And
have to, percolation tests and septic design through the Carroll County Health Department.
And they've indicated that they're willing to go through that process
Yes,
because they want to have more than 12 events a year. Yes.
yes.
That's all I have for Mr. Stein.
Okay, does anyone in the audience have any questions of Mr. Stein's testimony? Ms. Parrish?
Question relating to the parking. I know some trees and some, I guess, a riparian barrier kind of thing is going to have to be adjusted for the parking lot. What means would you have of protecting cars from if we're spraying or if we're harvesting and there's, you know, dust and debris and maybe some wind while the parking lot is full, what ways would you have to protect cars? And I'm not speaking because, you know, there's only so much you can do, but obviously when my sister and I get a phone call from an attorney that, you know, 12 BMWs have dust or spray on them, that's going to present a concern for us. So what way would you have to protect clients, or what way would you propose to protect clients so that we're not impacted down the road?
If that's a concern, well, the first thing I'd say is I think there's a right to farm act
Yes, oh,
in
absolutely,
place
there,
in Carroll
no,
County.
I
Yeah,
agree
yeah, that would-
100% with you
Right.
that it should be a non-issue, but,
But I would say that the best screen that we could propose would be some type of landscape screening that we could look at to, because that grows taller and fuller and is a better interceptor for any airborne dust, chemicals, anything like that, than any other item that we could provide. I would say that it also helps that this is down in Adele. Even the parking is gonna be below the elevation of the horizon. So if when strong wind were blowing through. But yeah, I'd say a landscape screen would probably be the best thing that we could propose, and we could do something that could stay up year-round and reach a pretty good height.
okay, thank you.
And Ms. Perry, those issues should be addressed at the technical review committee level and also the planning commission, because we'll have to submit a site plan. And that would be a very appropriate time for input on that. And Mr. Stein is on notice that those type of things are recommended by the community, so.
Okay, just a question, thank you, I
Yeah,
appreciate it, Mr.
and
Bailey.
that's fine, that's a perfectly good question. Any other questions of Mr. Stein's testimony? I've got one quick question. The parking will not be on the ag preservation portion of the property, is that correct?
Right, it will not, no,
Okay,
the
I
ag
just wanted
easement it's in the southwest corner and on the north side a bit, and we made sure that we respected it and stayed out
Okay,
of it with all
very,
parts.
very good,
Yep.
okay. Board members, any questions of Mr. Stein's testimony?
No.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Stein.
Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer.
That concludes our presentation.
Okay, now, anyone from the audience can go to the microphone and give your own testimony. So if you'd like to do that, go to the microphone and state your name, address, occupation, and spell for the record your last name.
Good morning. My name is Mark Blackston, Blacksten. I'm a banker for M&T Bank, and my wife Tracy is one of the owners of the adjoining property. My father-in-law is John Myers, who owns the neighboring farm. Excuse me, I'm a little hoarse this morning. So one of the things, and appreciate you going through all this plan, because you don't get all this when you see notices and postings, so it's really helpful to hear the full scope of what you're looking for. So two primary things I want to bring up. One area that we wanted to address that wasn't talked about is the noise. That is something that has been a significant impact in our immediate area over the last several years. And for those who don't know, there are 2 existing country inn wedding venues within about a 2.5-mile radius of this proposed property, and currently run several events throughout the year. And despite the traffic that we've heard about and some other things, the noise tends to be the biggest hurdle that residents in the area deal with. So I'm curious if there's any comment on that a little bit later, but that's a big area. And I'd also present for this board, one of the things that was recently highlighted by our sheriff was the limited resources with regard to noise ordinances in our area, and specifically related to venues and events and the number of calls they get per year. So I hope everybody's seen this, and I'm happy to share this for the group and present it to evidence.
At the conclusion of your testimony, go ahead and
Give it to.
give that to Mr. Dixon, and
Thank you.
he will go ahead and label that, and
Appreciate that.
we will accept that into evidence.
And what is that? It looks like a copy of a newspaper article?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
newspaper article, Clark. basically talks about the Carroll County noise ordinance soon to be updated for residents. So I'm not aware if it has actually been updated.
Yeah, I'm
But it goes
familiar.
on to talk about how a lot of calls in the past year or so have been putting a lot of pressure on our law enforcement because they're getting complaints from residents about excessive noise. And most of those are properties that are agriculturally zoned and have a different amount of allowed uses, such as a wedding venue in this case. So that's question number one. Question number two was, and this isn't really format for questions, right? This is more just me talking.
This is, you're providing testimony.
Got it. Thank you.
This isn't Jeopardy. You don't have to do it in the form of a question.
Perfect.
The
My
first
time
part
being
you
in the
did,
appeals
now you
space.
don't, okay?
The second one is, I just want to impress upon this group that there is a heavy concentration of these type of venues in our immediate area. I wish I had a map I could share. I would have happily brought one, but within about 2.5 miles, there are 2 other wedding venues that are open and active and working in this specific area of Carroll County. So the noise with those combined events over the weekend is even more amplified on occasions, and maybe some of my family members are going to testify as well, but there are occasions on a Saturday at 4 o'clock where you have 2 wedding venues going at the same time, and while it doesn't seem like it's a problem, they bowl up into just one big loud noise. So adding a third one in a concentrated area, I think, is something to be considered as well. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Wait a minute, stay at the microphone.
Oh.
Okay,
I don't have any
Mr.
questions.
Schaefer, have any
Blackston.
questions? Board, anyone else from the audience have any questions of Mr. Blackston's?
No, we don't.
We don't, okay. Board members, any questions of Mr. Blackston's testimony?
I have a general question, not for Mr. Blackstone. It refers here in this evidence you submitted that the county noise ordinance will soon be updated. Has it in fact been updated, or is anybody aware of that?
Mr. Voigt is in the back of the room shaking his head no.
No. Any plans to update it anytime soon?
Oh, that's up to the county commissioner, so.
So that's up to the commissioners, is what Mr. Voigt is saying.
Okay,
So I'm saying that, I'm repeating that because he's not near a microphone, so.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Voigt.
Right now, county commissioners, as far as I know, have not set up any meetings to look at updating the rules of ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Voigt.
So it's, the noise ordinance is on their radar, however, there's no definite plans.
Correct.
Okay. And that was Mr. Voigt's comment.
May I just point out that if that's the article I recall, the sheriff in that article told the county commissioners, this is usually something, 90% of these, 95, most of them get worked out. We go out there and so that could be why the county commissioners have not felt a need to revise the ordinance at this point.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Blackston, while you're up? Okay.
Nope, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'm assuming you're Mrs. Blackston?
Correct, yes.
Okay, please go and state your name, your address, occupation, and spell for the record your last name.
Sure, Tracy Blackston, my husband Mark. My address is 1084 Beggs Road, Blackston, B-L-A-C-K-S-T-E-N, Tracy, T-R-A-C-I-E, former school administrator. Obviously, one of the things that my husband touched upon and that we're touching upon here with the article is that although the noise issue with, we live very close to the Royal House, which is a historic venue for weddings, and of course Montague Meadows, as cited, is within 2.5 miles as well. And basically, although the sheriff has indicated that these issues are resolved quickly, he doesn't mention that they occur over and over and over again for the neighbors who surround these areas. And unfortunately for the venue owners, you can't always control the DJ or the drunken best man speech. Unfortunately, where we live, we have heard the best man speech word for word, sitting on our own patio, and that's at least a 1/4 mile away from, I'm speaking of the Royal House, to be honest. And, you know, celebration is a wonderful song for a wedding, perhaps. But again, we hear it over and over and over again. We have, in the past, tried to be, and continue to do so, try to be good neighbors with the wedding venue that I'm speaking of. And we've had a number to contact. And then, of course, as the wedding venue has changed hands several times in the past 8 years, you know, go and try to contact who we need to, in a nice way, to say, hey, you know, we're trying to be good neighbors here, but we can hear you. And we realize there is not, in Carroll County, a good way to manage the noise issue. As indicated, as your attorney here has indicated, that basically the sheriff has said, because there's really no great way to handle it, the sheriff's department does not have the $20,000 to $25,000 to buy a new decibel reader. You know, it hasn't been updated as how do we handle the noise complaints of when we're placing wedding venues in the middle of agricultural and residential areas. Unfortunately, the brunt of this comes on the neighbors who live in the Bachman Valley, Sullivan, Lemon Road area. Again, over and over, we're facing this same thing. And again, if it's only 12 issues a year, that's 12 Saturdays when our windows are vibrating, and you know, inside we can hear the noise. And again, that's a quarter mile away from that wedding venue where we are, where we live. So we would like this to be taken into consideration. You know, in Bachman Valley, this, again, would, if approved, this is the third wedding venue, just right smack dab in the middle of our agricultural community. And I realize that that's the intention of these business owners, is not to cause issues for their neighbors, and it is not to become a nuisance. But that is a very strong consideration that I would like presented. Thank you.
Okay, just
I do
stay
have
there.
one.
Mr. Schaefer?
I should have asked Mark, I'm sorry, but how far is Beggs Road, where you live on Beggs Road, from this,
Maybe a
What is
third
it?
of a mile.
a third of a mile?
Right, but also as far as for future purposes, when we own land around, I would not want to, you know, have a property that was, should we decide to sell it in the future, to have something, we have to consider future thoughts too. You know, my father lives, you know, a couple hundred yards.
You mean if you were to, in the future, if you were to develop your property, you would be concerned about the effect of that?
Oh, very possibly, or even just as far as to move to that location, as well as not necessarily develop it perhaps. But as I said, you know, my father lives a couple hundred yards from the location too.
Okay.
So that is a consideration that we're all facing, the noise issues in our Bachman Valley area.
Okay, any other questions of Ms. Blackston's testimony? Board members? Thank you, Ms. Oh. Did you?
I was just saying hello to a neighbor.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Ms. Blackston. Any other comments? Is that Mr. Myers behind the mask? I believe it is. Mr. Myers, could you go ahead and state your name and address and occupation, and spell for the record your last name?
Yes, my name is John Myers. I reside at 460 Old Bachman Valley Road, which is adjacent to these folks' property that they're wishing to get the variance on today. I farmed there all my life, which has nothing to do with this comment, but I have farmed all my life. And presently, some of the concerns and the reason why I'm here today is because several things. First off, we use the lane, the Shipley Lane, to get our crops in and out and do harvesting and what have you. And also in the future, if any time that property would have a house built on it, they would also have to use that as well for their entrance. That's one concern. Second concern, even though these things sound really good in theory, And I've been around, as you can see by looking at me, quite a while. And the bottom line is sometimes they don't work out very well. I'll give you a quick example. We used to farm a lot of land, and I don't mean that in a boastful sense, but we used to farm a lot of land in Carroll County. And anyhow, we rented a farm up on an area of Carroll County, and a horse, we were spraying. And we do a lot of spraying with a helicopter as well as by ground. And anyhow, when we sprayed this crop, about 3 weeks later, I was issued a letter from an attorney saying our neighbor's horse died. And they sued us for $25,000. And I had to, even though these things are good, I still have to defend myself. And as Mr. Schaefer knows, I don't mean to be smart, attorneys are expensive. And it's also time consuming. I have to defend myself. We did. We went to court and we found out that the horse, this is true, completely true, of course. The horse died a day before the spraying took place. So we didn't have to pay the $25,000, but we did have to pay a lot of attorney fees. So in turn, sometimes this, on theory, it sounds quite well, but it doesn't always work. And when you're spraying, droplets will move an extremely long distance if the conditions are right. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can say, well, spray when there's no wind. You can't do that. And some type insecticide, herbicide, you don't want to spray when there's no wind. So my major concern is the right-of-way, as far as access, and also our spraying and harvesting of crops. Because I can certainly imagine if my daughter was getting married and she was confronted with a tremendous amount of dust or spray, I would be angry myself. So they're the major concerns. I just want to protect that, and I would hope that the minutes would show that today for the future, because that is a very serious objection that I have, or concern that I have. Any questions from you folks?
Mr. Schaefer?
I don't have any, I don't know any from Mr. Myers. Mr. Myers, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Clark. And the other thing I failed to mention, I realize that I'm protected by agricultural law, but again, I have to defend myself. It's costly and sometimes very confusing. So, thank you.
Wait a minute, Mr. Myers, you're not off the hook yet. Board members, any questions of Mr. Myers' testimony? Well, the one thing I'd like to add is that we do have the right to farm law both as a state law and as a county ordinance. And the one, I'm assuming that this was prior to, I can't remember when we did the right to farm ordinance, it's been over 20 years ago. At that point, the reason for the right to farm ordinance is so that it goes before a committee that's based upon people that serve on the Carroll County Ag Commission before it goes into the court system. So there is an additional layer there before we do get the legal cost. But I'm a farmer also, and I worry about those very same issues that Mr. Myers has brought up. And the good thing is that you're here to make sure that the applicants are very aware of what can occur in the normal harvesting and planting of row crops.
It's something about a spray machine in a field, and I understand. And God forbid, when you put a helicopter in the air, it becomes a lot more serious. And it's a real issue. Trust me, it's a real issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Anyone else have any testimony? Ms. Parrish?
Sorry, one more thing about the noise, and I know it's not in relation, it's just such a deja vu for me. I was in this exact hearing room when folks bought the Christian Royer house, and it was a family, several daughters and their mom, and I sat and listened to the testimony, and one of our neighbors spoke a lot about noise, asked a lot of questions, and honestly, I felt like she was overreacting. I didn't say anything at that hearing. I didn't ask any questions because it just seemed like a wedding venue, it's going to be fine, it's not going to be a problem. And boy, do I regret that, because I have sat in my house with all of our windows closed from May until October, and I hear the DJs. And I'm not suggesting that is the owner of the properties that have their finger on the volume, but the windows rattle. I can hear the shrieking, and again, that's whoever's controlling the entertainment, which isn't necessarily the owner and developer of a property. But I can tell you it's a frustration, and it's not a frustration once a year or 5 times a year. It's probably a dozen times from May, probably because it's a tent. I think that's part of the problem at the Christian Royer House, is that it's a tent, so that the noise is not as controlled. If it were, say, the Antrim up in Tawnytown, which is, an actual structure. Again, I know I don't live currently next to this property. We own the farmland. But I will tell you, I can't, the noise has been a frustration, and I did not understand that however many years ago when I sat in that back row and listened to the attorney for the family that bought the Christian Royer House. I really felt like it was not going to be a problem, noise wasn't going to be an issue, and I have regretted that over the last 7 or 8 years, however long they've been open. So I just, I'm sorry to say that. I understand that this family enjoyed growing up in a nice, quiet farm area, and I did too. I appreciate that, but it's been very eye-opening for me over the last 7 or 8 years living on Beggs Road, with Royer House on that side and Montague Meadows behind us. So I really just wanted to, it's just a statement.
Any questions of Ms. Parrish's testimony, Mr. Schaefer?
No, thank you.
Board members? Thank you, Ms. Parrish. Okay. At this point, presentation of testimony and evidence is now closed, and summations are in order.
Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, this is a conditional use case, and we're governed by Schultz v. Pritz, which I think is directly relevant to the noise complaint, which I perceive to be the major concern here, combined with the what if somebody sues me, because of my farming. That's exactly the kind. First of all, I would note a couple specific things about the noise complaints. Number one, they appear to be directed at the Christian Royer House, but also at the potential for my client to cause the problem. Number two, there's no real houses around this property. These people live, near. I'm not saying they couldn't hear it. Maybe I live in the country. Heck, I was on the golf course the other day. I could hear somebody talking at a house about 600 yards away on their deck. But this is why we have Schultz v. Pritz. Noise is inherent to any country inn event facility. It's part of the deal. Just like funeral homes have increased traffic when popular people die. And that's exactly what Schultz v. Pritz said. It said you can't count as an adverse effect noise if it's inherent to the use. You have to show there's something special about this adverse effect in this case. And with all due respect, I appreciate the concerns. I certainly do. But there's been no showing that there's anything about this property that makes it exacerbates the noise. In fact, it's in a dell. They don't live near there. There's no houses overlooking it. So it's clearly not the kind kind of testimony nor the reason to turn down a case like this. Especially, and I'll jump to the what if I get sued. Now, that's always a tough one for the lawyer to come back, the what if. Well, what if my people are total litigious, anti-farmers? In fact, my clients signed or were presented with, as required by the county's ordinance, the farm notice when they bought the property, and I went over this with them. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with it. If you've done any real estate transactions, you'll note that in Carroll County, if you buy property in the ag zone, you are required to be given a one-page document. It's in the code that says something like the following: you're buying land in an agricultural zone. Get ready for some noise, dust, odors, and fumes from farming. Don't complain about it. This is being presented to you when you contract to buy the property. My people, number one, were aware of that. Number two, are very happy to be in an agricultural area. And number three, have had some experience dealing with the neighborly things that go on, or sometimes not so neighborly, but the neighborly things that go on when you're in an agricultural community. And so that what if is way too attenuated to say, well, we're going to just turn this down then. There might be these people could be outrageously litigious. Now, let's circle back, however, to the merits of the case. You've got a family operation that has bought a historic property in Carroll County that is willing to invest a lot of money in it, and will be the on-site operators, owners, and managers. I mean, I'm not saying that's required of a country inn, but I'm saying that's better in the scheme of things than, yeah, I bought this farm and my company runs event facilities, and we're going to hire 12 people, and we're going to, we'll come up there every time there's a wedding. Don't worry, we'll do it. This is a quite attractive application, and furthermore, it meets and furthers a lot of the public policy goals that are reflected in the zoning ordinance and all your other ordinances. It allows the use and renovation of an old farm property in a way that produces tax income, brings people to the area, and allows money to be spent renovating a property that otherwise might go, who knows who buys that. And listen, everybody that owns property, and I've told my family and myself this for years, you roll the roulette wheel and you get the bad neighbor. It's possible. The only way to protect yourself is by 20 or 30,000 acres, and then you're still going to have border problems. But and I know this board's been, you can't turn down applications because what if somebody's a bad neighbor? And by the way, my people have made all the efforts. They've been there for a little bit, and they've made an effort to be cooperative, and will continue to do so. So, in summary, I think we clearly meet the dictates of the code, and clearly qualify for the approval. And I want to say look forward to, but I'll say look forward to going through the regulatory process, which is daunting, but which is specifically designed to make sure that these kind of uses meet the requirements that make them manageable and good. So, thank you very much.
Mr. Myers, you want to offer some summation comments?
Yes, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, you're entitled,
Okay.
one of you are entitled to summation comments.
Thank you. I understood what Mr. Schaefer's saying. Intellectually, I totally understand. But number one, there is a house close to these property, it's my house, and it's about 800 feet away. And because, again, of my age, I'm not too concerned about the noise, because I probably won't be here long enough to listen to a whole heck of a lot more noise. But the bottom line is, what you're saying, Clark, and I know it's true, however, it doesn't negate, these folks are not going to, they're our friends, that's how I feel, and they're our neighbors. They're not the ones that are gonna file suit against me when I'm spraying over my daughter's property. It's gonna be the people who are there, the patrons are gonna be the ones who are suing me, not these folks. My gripe is not, I don't have a gripe, I'm just having concerns. And it doesn't negate any of those things. It just doesn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Any rebuttal, Mr. Schaefer?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay, the hearing and record of this case is now closed in accordance with the Open Meetings Act of Maryland. The board will now consider the case. Board members. Mr. Simmons, we'll start with you. You usually defer, but we're gonna start with you.
Well, thank you very much. This is a simple case, it really is. And there's no opposition, there's no debate. I think you're gonna do well. I certainly hope you do well. And I'm gonna vote in favor of your application. That's all I need to say. Well done.
Mr. Caldwell.
First, I'd like to commend the applicant for restoring that property. It's a beautiful location. I think that's definitely a labor of love doing that. Very costly one, but certainly worthwhile. Secondly, since you're going to be resident on the premises, I think there's going to be a certain amount of local noise control in that situation, as opposed to one for a location that's remotely managed, should I say. I don't see any reason not to approve this application.
Ms. Eckert.
I recognize, excuse me, the concerns regarding the noise. And, you know, we have people living in the community that are now hearing the noise from the Warrior House. And to that end, I think that the family living on this property will mitigate some of that. I would agree with Mr. Caldwell. It does make me want to suggest, there was discussion, I believe, that Ms. Parrish presented saying that ownership had changed several times. And I don't know whether that means the use or the noise on the property has progressively gotten worse depending on the ownership. So I would like to at least discuss the possibility of maybe it's limited to this family or number of events. I mean, I think it's a great proposal. Perfect location. I think it meets the Schultz versus Pritt standard. I'm concerned about 60 events a year.
You have an alternative suggestion?
I'm looking for discussion. I mean, you live in, and I don't know if you can proffer any statements. You live in that general area.
I'm a neighbor.
What are you experiencing?
Hearing loss.
Here, okay. Enough said. Enough said.
That comes with my age. No, Saturday afternoons are not disturbing to me. Matter of fact, most of the noise is good noise, good fun, and I appreciate it.
And I do recognize that the topography is shielding this. That's an enhancement for choosing this location. I just feel like because the concerns were brought by the neighbors that have had experience with other similar venues, that we at least deserves a discussion or consideration.
We wouldn't be able to do this with a limit on the, number of events. If that number was 300 or something, maybe, but, we're hoping to grow this to 70, 80, depending on how the business goes. We want to be able to do business because they're going to have payments to make. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Mr. Snyder.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing the board deals with in all these cases is oftentimes the being respectful to a property owner's ability to be able to develop and do on their property what is a basic right, obviously within certain criteria. And how that influences people who own adjoining properties or community that joins, that live in that community, and how the right of a person to develop their property or to do on their property what they want to do, and how that affects their enjoyment of their property. And so there's always a house built next to you, you know, it's gonna impact you in some way. Maybe you don't get the sun, maybe your trees or flowers don't grow. But again, does that compromise the ability of a person to be able to build a house next door? So, you know, looking at this as in respect to that, I do not see, based on the testimony, any known issues that should impact this person's ability to develop this property in this way. I think it's not in conflict with the master plan. They have a lot of hoops to jump through. Matter of fact, that road is very rocky and hilly going forward. So I think in the interest of this person's right or this person's ability to use their property as they see fit does not pose an unreasonable impact to the neighbors or to the community, and therefore I'll support it.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I guess I get to go last. So what we're charged with as the Board of Zoning Appeals here this morning is a request for a conditional use for a country inn and banquet facility. This is not a principal permitted. That's the reason it's a conditional use in the ag zone, and that's why we're here. What we're charged with is whether this location of a country inn and banquet facility would result in adverse effects greater than elsewhere in the agricultural district. And that's the Schultz v. Pritz. And I don't see where it violates that. It actually falls into that. The topography of the location, I think, will mitigate some of the sound issues, unlike what was described between Beggs Road and the Royer House. That Beggs Road is a direct line and it's only a couple hundred yards. We heard about the right to farm ordinance. We've heard about who could possibly bring lawsuits. Unfortunately, but fortunate for Mr. Schaefer, we live in a litigious society, and we can't guarantee that there wouldn't be any lawsuits, but the right to farm is the first step in avoiding the legal process. I have a real problem with right-of-ways issues, but all of my concerns were taken away as a result of the site plan and the written right-of-ways. Nothing is a gentleman's agreement. It's all in writing, so there shouldn't be any issues with that. Definitely think there needs to be a 10 p.m. cutoff on the music. And again, Schultz v. Pritz, I think it meets all the standards there. And when we made the site visit, I made the comment that I thought this was a Civil War era structure, and in fact it was built in 1861, I think is what the testimony was. So with those points, I can see no reason for denying this. Any additional comments, board members?
One comment. I might want to suggest that the applicant consider in making, accepting reservations from clients, to make them aware that they are in a agricultural district and subject to, dust, noise, spraying, so on and so forth.
Certainly, and my experience, which is, I have a little bit of it, is that if it works correctly, quote unquote, my clients will coordinate with the neighboring farmers, in the sense of, we're having one Saturday night. Not, don't spray because we're having one Saturday night, but most farmers are decent people, most other people are decent people.
Thank you.
And most farmers are not interested in gearing up their sprayers because they just found out somebody's having an event Saturday night. They're gonna spray Saturday night if it makes sense from a farming standpoint. They might even reschedule their spraying. They don't have to. But they might even say, you know, they're doing that Saturday night, I'm not gonna spray Saturday night. I don't have to, I can do it. But yes, Mr. Caldwell, that, we will coordinate, and my clients certainly are sensitive to that.
And I would like to say in response to that comment, I was impressed when Mrs. Parrish spoke first about, you know, the concern about, you know, the neighbors, you know, what effect is our farming going to have on your guests at these events? The Myers and the Blackstons, you know, effectively suggested the same thing. I was impressed at the consideration for guests at your venue that was shown by the neighbors. So I would like to commend them for that. And that was, you know, played into my reasoning of suggesting that maybe we should, you know, address some of the concerns that they issued because they were showing such great respect at that point. So it seems to me that I was the only one that, you know, had any concerns or potentially about the number of events. I understand that your business model doesn't work if it's, you know, any less than what you're proposing. So I understand and I respect that, and I appreciate the clarification on that. And I think it should be a 10 o'clock cutoff, but otherwise I'm.
And that needs to be in our approval motion, because if we don't, doesn't matter what the testimony was, then there's no enforcement mechanism.
I'll make a motion for, Mr. Chairman.
I'm absolutely ready.
In the matter of case number 6368 before the Board of Zoning Appeals, it is so moved that the board approve the conditional use request with a limit of music until 10 p.m.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Our oral decision will become final upon a written decision which will be issued within 30 days unless otherwise extended by this board. The board's decision may be appealed by filing a petition for judicial review with the clerk of the circuit court for Carroll County, in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 200, Title 7 of the Maryland Rules of Procedure. The appeal must be filed within 30 days of the date of the board's written decision. Thank you very much. This hearing is adjourned. I'm gonna call the Board of Zoning Appeals back to order, and our 11 o'clock agenda item is case number 6367. Before we get started, there's a sign-up sheet on the side of the clipboard and the table. If you haven't already signed in, please make sure you sign in before the end of the hearing. That'll be part of the public record. With that, Jim, would you like to go ahead and introduce the file?
Absolutely. Calling the case 6367, today, Wednesday, January 5th, 2022. This is a request for a conditional use for a commercial kennel in the Ag District at 5718 Emery Road. In the file, we have a notice of public hearing that was advertised in the Carroll County Times on December 6th, 2021. The notice was also posted on the county's website. A notice of a public hearing posted by Scott Robinson, zoning inspector, on November 30th, 2021. Also in the file is a letter to Joe Vance from Laura Mattias regarding the site plan. A letter from Dawn Kinna to Joe Vance, a memo from Abigail Rogers of the Planning Department to Joe Vance, a letter from Linda Eisenberg to the BZA, and a letter from Tom Harris to Joe Vance, as well as letters from Jay Voigt, Sam Newell, Janet O'Mara, and J.P. Smith to Joe Vance are all in the file. I move that the file be entered into evidence.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor of the motion to enter the file into evidence?
Aye.
All opposed? We will go ahead and enter the file into evidence. Mr. Allman, could you go ahead and pass the file to
Yes.
Mr. Simmons? Okay, let me explain the process that we're going to use in the hearing, because it appears that several people are in the audience today that have never been through this process. Mr. Luzuriaga appears to be the counsel for the applicant. He will have the opportunity to make his opening statements and then go ahead and call witnesses. The witnesses then will be able to be cross-examined of their testimony by anyone in the audience and then by this board. At that point, when Mr. Luzuriaga has extinguished all of his, all of the people that he wants to call as witnesses, then anyone from the audience can go to the microphone and they can give their own testimony. So after the testimony is given by the applicant, the only questions you're supposed to ask questions only of their testimony. You'll have the opportunity for your own testimony later in the process. So with that, if you're going to testify today, could you please stand and raise your right hand? Okay. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Very good. You can be seated. Mr. Luzuriaga, opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the board. Thank you for your time today. I will do my best to be brief yet complete. We're going to present a case for a conditional use for a commercial kennel as defined in the code. We will expect to hear testimony most directly from my client to my right, your left, Ms. Lauren Schaefer. She is the applicant. We'll also have expert testimony in the form of Mr. Podolak seated behind me in the audience as far as the planning and distance requirements necessary to meet the conditional use criteria. And I think at the conclusion of the evidence presented and any opposition that we might face, you'll find that not only do we meet or exceed all of the conditions associated with the use, but that there is no adverse impact of the use at this location above and beyond that anywhere else in the zone. And we will ask you to approve the use as applied for.
Okay. You want to call your first witness?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Bale. I'm going to call Ms. Lauren Schaefer. Mrs. Lauren Schaefer is present to my right.
Ms. Schaefer, could you please state your name, address, and occupation and spell for the record your last name?
Lauren Nicole Schaefer. My address is 5718 Emery Road, Upper Co, Maryland 21155. Schaefer is spelled Shaffer. I worked at Carroll Hospital labor and delivery until last January, and then I stayed home with a baby and I pursued this as a new business.
Okay, you can proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Schaefer, can you describe for the board your educational background that led to your prior employment?
Yes, so I attended North Carroll High School and then went to Career and Tech to receive my CNA. Then I started working at Carroll Hospital Center and was promoted through different departments there until I ended up becoming an L&D surgical tech. And I worked there for approximately a little over 10 years before this previous January.
Okay. And you still have the option to return to that employment if you elect, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And can you describe briefly for the board what started your interest in dogs and specifically breeding dogs?
So I always loved animals. My dad raised me and never had time for them, so I've always been keeping my eye on them. That was the first thing that I wanted. And then as we did get dogs through the years, I discovered health problems with them. And so I just started inquiring more and researching more. And then I was reaching out to different people from Facebook, and I made some really wonderful connections in Georgia and down in North Carolina. And through that, it's networked farther and really discovered good breeding practices versus bad, what you want to do with a dog before you choose to breed them, health testing, pedigrees, and it's kind of expanded from there. And then I wanted to have a dog of our own like that, but then realized we tried to get dogs around us, and I was misled. They did not have all of those things. So that's where I saw that there was a need for dogs where the standard is followed for breeding, and my mentors offered to help me and guide me through how to do that.
Okay. And you did mention earlier that you graduated from North Carroll High School. How long have you lived in the area?
I've lived here for 32 years, actually off of Emery Road the whole time. My dad lives on Winterberry Court.
Okay. And how long have you lived as your current location?
6.5 years.
And you're married, your husband's here, correct, with your youngest?
Yes.
And do you have any other children?
Yes, I have 2 other boys. Their ages are 8 and 7. They attend Sandy Mount Elementary.
Thank you. Okay, so we've discussed amongst ourselves, the county code defines a kennel fairly broadly. It includes the possibility of boarding dogs overnight, training dogs, and breeding dogs. Can you describe which, if any, of those activities you want to do at this location?
So I only want to breed my own dogs. I called and the county code said 2 litters or more. So that was when I decided that I needed to pursue this farther. I wanted to have everything done correctly, all the steps, before I started this business and knew that I could really run it and do it. And so I do plan on having more than 2 litters. And then also the county code, the 3 dogs, I thought that we would later on expand. But it will only be for my own dogs because I don't want to introduce any outside parasites, infections. I'm actually really cautious because as you get into this, it's a very large investment when you're buying these dogs with high pedigrees from Germany. So if anything, it's most risk to introduce anybody from the outside to my dogs.
So to be clear to the board what you're asking of it, do you have any intentions of either accepting or entertaining the idea of boarding anyone else's dog?
No.
And given the opportunity to proceed with your business, is there a typical day-to-day operation of what your proposed business would look like?
So typically, I start with my family first. My children go to Sandy Mount, so bus doesn't come till around 8:40, 8:50. So it's getting them ready and up, and then while they're getting ready, I do let the dogs out around 8. They go down to our field We've chosen not to kennel our dogs. That's something that when I looked more into this, I thought back, everybody has their dogs kenneled on concrete, and I didn't like the idea of it. So they go down to the field. They spend about an hour down there while I'm getting the kids onto the bus. They come back, they eat breakfast, or their first meal of the day. German Shepherds are known for flipping their stomachs like other large breeds, so they stay in for a minimum of 2 hours after they eat. And usually they're sleeping during that, so we call it nap time. Then they go back out, they play for an hour or so, and then we do the same thing for midday meal. And they go back in for about those 2 hours, and then they go back out in the afternoon. Now that it's getting dark so early, they're coming in earlier, and then we're just going back out there and doing occasional potty breaks for ones that want to go out. It's just a one-on-one thing though. And then during the summertime, they would go out for a third time to play around for an hour or so before they came back in. But we bring everybody up before dark, more so for the dog's sake and for the neighbors. They could sustain injuries from running into each other. With large breeds, you really have to protect their hips and elbows, because even though I get them certified, of course, if they're injured, that would end their breeding career, and I would have to find a home for them that can then take care of them, and then, of course, sustain the medical costs for the rest of their lives.
So you have to forgive me, I don't think I've done a good enough job of framing your business. You mentioned German Shepherds. Why is it that you're talking about those specifically?
So German Shepherds are the breed that I fell in love with. My uncle had them as I was growing up, and then my brother-in-law. We had a lab, but it just wasn't the same. So when we decided that we really wanted to get a good dog, and we had the money, we went for a German Shepherd. I love their loyalty, just their eye contact, how willing they are to please. Of course, through this journey, though, I've found that there is good breeding of German Shepherds and bad breeding, so that my knowledge of their loyalty and intelligence has only increased as I found out what a true German Shepherd that was bred correctly is possible of.
So is it fair to say, unless there was some sort of drastic change to your business plan, you want to breed exclusively German Shepherds?
Yes.
Okay. And you've talked about the schedule that you think would take place day to day. Now, obviously, you've also testified that that's already in place. So you currently have not had a litter of puppies from one of your dogs, is that correct?
Correct.
So there's presently a business model that's in place that you've implemented to get a cash infusion and get your feet on the ground and get things running, is that right?
Yes.
Can you describe to the board what it is? How did you do that? And that led to the schedule that you just described.
How did I leave to acquire the dog?
How did you get the puppies that you just described the schedule for?
Okay. So none of my dogs have had their own litter yet. And through one of my mentors in North Carolina, she imports dogs directly from Germany, which is how I got my older females. But by chance, she had to go to Florida to take care of a sick family member, and I didn't have any puppies, and she said this would be good to get your feet on the ground and to learn how to sell them, to work out all the kinks in your contracts, and to practice everything that you've been. So I ended up taking her imported litter from Germany. I met her at the airport at Dulles, and I have them with their passports and have been starting to sell them.
So that's not what you would expect to be the business model moving forward, is it?
No, we really just did that because we had spent so much on the dogs and the area to take care of them that we were kind of just at a standstill and we weren't making any money back. And we also had started a Facebook and a website and really wanted to create traffic, and we were kind of just sitting there going in the negatives. So I thought it would be a good experience, and she said if I had any issues, she of course would take them back. So it seemed like the best option to go ahead and try, and I had a safety net there if I couldn't sell them.
And you also testified earlier, you're aware that only if you're going to sell more than 2 litters of dogs per year do you require this zoning approval and a license through the Humane Society, correct?
Yes.
And you have not done more than 2, correct?
No.
So, shifting to what you expect your regular business model would be, assuming you get up off the ground, what you described, would that be year-round?
It would be year-round. It's really up to Mother Nature, though. A lot of people will call and ask me to predict when I'm going to have my next litter. I really have no control over that. It is all up to Mother Nature. If she does go into heat, if she is bred successfully, the other uphill battle I have is I do not keep any of my own sires. I use sires that are traveling back and forth between Germany because they're actively competing and being titled over there. And to be considered in German Shepherd world over in Germany, you cannot just be over in America competing because they don't view our shows to have the same standards as theirs. So I always progesterone test, and my girls will travel to the stud. So of course my chances go way down because of that. It's not completely natural that they're just living together and nature's completely taking its course. I have to have it down to the day that we travel to see him and come back.
And how many heat cycles does a healthy adult female German Shepherd have per year?
The average should be 2.
And under the guidelines and the accepted practice within the industry, what's the acceptable rate at which a dog can safely breed and be healthy?
So it's always recommended that they see the vet first when they go into heat. They go over them and give you their opinion on whether she should be bred or not. Some people do every other cycle, other people do every 2, and then skip 1. But the first guideline is what really is the decision maker if the vet says that they're okay. But you would never breed back to back to back to back. Everybody needs time off.
And at what ages is it considered safe for a German Shepherd to be bred?
So it can be younger, but because my girls are being titled and they have to be shown with an SG rating or better in Germany, they don't get started breeding until they're after 2 to 2.5. Then if they are breeding on that cycle, most of the time they will be retired when they are about 5. Now I do have one female that was only bred once, and she is 4, so she would be able to breed a little bit longer, also depending if the vet says she's healthy each time, because she hasn't had many litters. So it's more so about how many litters they have. But the big age difference with most breeders is they breed them as soon as they're physically able to, but I'm looking to meet the German standards. So the dog has to have temperament testing, breed survey, hips and elbows must be done. They must receive a working title, and they must be shown until they receive their SG rating or better. I personally want them to receive their V rating or better.
Can you describe for not only me, but perhaps members of the board, what the rating scale, what's the range? Which of those is better, and what are the different standards?
So anything under an SG, Germany will not give you breeding rights for your dog. SG is very good. V is excellent, and a VA is excellent select, and you can only receive that at the International Seeger Show.
And that's your ambition for any of your dogs that you intend to keep in the breed, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, moving back to the day-to-day business side of what you described earlier, do you intend to have any employees?
I do not.
Now, what about veterinary care for puppies? Is that something that has to happen on site?
Yes. I could travel, but I found a wonderful mobile vet, and he would come out, he said approximately when they're 6 weeks old, to do their health check and to give their first vaccine, of course as long as they're healthy. If not, he would be on call and I would be able to have him come back. I also use a reproduction specialist for my females, but that is down in Hunt Valley, so I also would be able to use them if I had an emergency with a puppy, so it will not always be a traveling vet.
Okay. And assuming everything is going to plan, do your puppies require more than one visit from a veterinarian before they reach an age at which you can sell them?
No, they do not. You would be able to give them the health certificate and their first vaccine at the same time.
So absent any extraordinary circumstances, it's one mobile vet visit per litter?
Yes.
So if you don't have any employees, who's doing all the work?
I am, and right now while I'm getting started, my husband's being a big asset to me because of the little one back there. He does not like to be set down. So I plan to do it all myself though. But he's there as my backup. Anything that I need, he's able to help me do.
So in what you expect to be your business model and the one that you've temporarily fashioned right now, is it typical for you to have any customer or potential purchaser of a dog come to your property?
Yes.
And when would that happen?
It's by appointment only. They have to call. I do a phone interview with them. From my mentors, I've got a list of questions that I kind of slide into the conversation as I'm asking them, what are your preferences? What do you want from the dog? And then they have to pass that off. If they don't, I kind of give them a reason of why German Shepherd might be too much for them and quickly, try to just deter the conversation or maybe say another breeder would be the best one for you. If it does seem like it's going to work, then I discuss having a Zoom meeting so that they can see the puppies in person without being in person. But a lot of people really want to see videos of them. Another thing that I found really successful is with these imported puppies, we decided to go ahead and get videos of them completely moving. I thought of that because when you're getting a dog from Germany, my mentors have taught me you don't just want a picture of them. You don't even want just a quick video of them. You want to see all of their movement and how they sit. And I thought, well, why wouldn't I do the same thing for my customers? It would be another thing that will set me apart from other breeders that aren't following the same. And it's really worked. So when people call, I can tell them, I have them all labeled. Here's the puppy. You'll be able to see a video. Tell me what else you think of her. So a lot of people already have a puppy in mind just through that first video process of them watching it on my website. And then we go, next step is to the Zoom.
Okay, so I led with a poor question then, because that led the board to believe that folks are coming to your property at some point, but I haven't gotten you there yet. So at what point in a potential purchase of a dog would a customer ever come to your house physically?
So if we've talked back and forth, I know that they're committed, they're serious about a puppy. We've confirmed that they are able to pay, how they're going to pay. I do welcome them to come out because I think it's really important that they see the puppy. I also really want them to see how I care for the puppies because I think that's a very important part. Then we schedule a visit, and at that time is when I give them my address. It's not publicly listed for people to just drive by when they want. That's not fair to my neighbors, to my children, or even to my dogs. And I don't want that. So we then set up an appointment. I give them specific directions, my address, and stay by my phone, and direct them to call me if they have any issues coming back.
And what is the earliest age of a puppy at which you will entertain a visit from a prospective customer?
The very first visit that I would entertain would be 6 weeks.
And at what point are you permitted to sell the puppy and give it to the new owner?
I wouldn't release a puppy until it was over 8 weeks.
Okay. All right, so you've described the process of coordinating an actual site visit. Is your location open in any sense for somebody to just drive up or walk in and see or talk to you about your dogs?
No.
So if you had to speculate, do you expect the average number of cars per day coming to your location to be anything of substance?
No.
So as it relates to the puppies, there would really only be traffic generated 6 weeks following a successful litter at the first opportunity. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then if puppies are ready to go to the ultimate owners at 8 weeks, between 6 and 8 weeks, you're not going to accommodate any more visits than the initial one and when to pick up, are you?
No.
Okay. And for times when you've arranged for somebody to be at your property visiting or picking up their dog, do you have adequate parking?
Yes.
And do you, well, you already answered that. So you talked a little bit about the the goal for your business and the type of dog that you want to be able to put out into the marketplace, do you believe there's a demand for the type of service and breed that you want to provide to Carroll and the neighboring counties?
I do, through extensive research, because I do not want to be actively competing against someone. I looked and searched through many, many pedigrees. Of course, lots of breeders will put on there they have championship bloodlines, but I've come to discover through many pedigree searches that that bloodline is extensively further back, and they're not titling, showing, and getting that breed survey like I talked about the German standards are. A lot of breeders say that they come from that bloodline, but then they choose not to do it with their current generation. I've also made a wonderful friend in Carroll County, but she likes the American line of German Shepherds, but we still discuss back and forth a lot, even though we have different views. And we both have said just how important it is to have temperament testing on a dog before you choose to breed it, because that's really one of the main reasons why German Shepherds have such a bad reputation here, is many breeders do not take that step before they choose to breed their dog. Along with hips and elbows, a lot of people discuss it, but they do not actually have the certificates to go along with it, and various other health testing.
And with the temporary business model you used with the imported puppies, have you seen a demand for the dogs?
Yes. I've had people driving 3 and 4 hours once they finally committed and selected a puppy to come pick this puppy up from us. I received numerous feedback from how excited they are, how friends and family, they come with a passport, saw the passport and can't believe that they were able to really get a German imported dog registered with Germany. So I do feel like I have the demand. I was kind of surprised. I'm very timid and anxious, so I was sure that I was going to be sending some of these puppies back. I wouldn't take the risk if I didn't know that I had a place for them to go back. And then before I knew it, all 10 were gone, and I was telling people I don't have anything available. I'll have to reach back out to you and let you know when I'm expecting a litter.
And have people taken you up on that? Do they want to hear back from you, or is there a waiting list
Yes.
of some kind? Or?
I haven't started an official waiting list. I believe you should confirm the dog's pregnancy before you do that waiting list, and people should really get to pick the mom based on her personality, because my moms all offer something different. So I have told people I will reach out, I'll make an announcement once I confirm her pregnancy with ultrasound. I will go ahead and open up that waiting list. You can pick male or female if you're the first 4 people on my list, and then after that, it would be what I have, or you can opt to wait for another litter and you would be higher on the list for the next litter. But I will not start an official waiting list until I have a confirmed pregnancy. And I've actually had people call me back just to make sure they haven't missed the announcement.
Okay. Obviously, you wouldn't be here if the answer to this question was no, but do you think that your property is suited for the proposed use you're requesting today?
Yes, I do.
Can you describe for the board what, if any, improvements that you and your husband have made to support the proposed business model?
Yes, so we had a fenced-in pasture. We had some goats, and we had a mini cow for a little over a year during the pandemic, and it was a lot of fun. She ended up having a baby calf. But then when I decided to start this business, I wanted to use that pasture. I wanted to see the dogs be able to run around. Like I told you before, I don't really like the idea of them just being in kennels. But we've also had to make a lot of improvements because it's fun for them to run around and play, but especially females, they do not always get along and see eye to eye. So we needed somewhere to put one of them if we're down there playing with them and there is a occurrence, somebody's not getting along or not being nice, to be able to put them there so that we can get all the other dogs back up to their kennel and then bring that dog up by itself. Because my children do run around my property, and also with me, I'm a smaller person, so I want to always be able to maintain control over my dogs. So we have them set up there. When it's nice out, we always separate them to eat so that we know exactly what everybody's getting, what supplements they're getting. Some of them can stay down there and eat, but then they come back up to their kennel, and then we rotate through our house 2 girls at a time. It's kind of like horses. It's based on personality and who's the alpha and who is not, and that's how I kind of rotate, and they're able to stay in the house with us. But it would be too much to let them all stay in and expect there not to be any quarrel, or even with my children, it would be a lot of commotion in the house. So we try to keep everything nicely scheduled and be able to predict how it's going to go.
Let me start with the pasture you described. I've got a couple of photos I'm going to show you that I've marked as exhibits 1 through 5. Do these photos show the boundaries of the pasture you were just describing?
Yes.
Okay. And exhibit 1 specifically, there is a stake in the foreground of the property. Is that, to the best of your knowledge, your property line?
Yes.
Okay. And then exhibit 2, is that the same fence just looking up the other direction?
Yes.
Right. And then 3, 4, and 5 also show boundaries of that same pasture, is that right?
Yes.
And is there, to your knowledge, can you even see your closest neighbor in any of these photos?
No.
Mr. Chair, I move for admission of exhibits 1 through 5.
Okay, we will accept those into evidence. Mr. Ullman, you want to go ahead and document those 1 through 5 applicants' exhibits?
Absolutely.
And
My
then-
apologies, I thought the document would be here for me to show to the board, but I'm sure Mr. Ullman can pass them up. No,
Yeah, and then pass them along to,
Oh, you need to mark them? I'm sorry, I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
they're marked on the back. Are they marked on
Yes,
the back?
there's stickers on the back.
Okay,
And then
so we're 1 through 5. Okay, thank you.
Now let's talk about a couple other areas on the property. I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna mark as exhibit 6. And this photo shows the edge of, for lack of a better term, the parking area and driveway on your property, is that right?
Yeah.
And there's 3 structures in this particular picture, correct?
Yes.
All right, the one in the middle, I'm gonna put a red X on the roof. Is there anything associated with that structure that you would plan to use for this business model?
Yes. I would like to have that set up as the kennel where the dogs sleep when they're not in the home with us. Most importantly, that's where they go to eat when they're all separated, and I would keep their dietary supplement supplies out there.
And there wouldn't be any young puppies in that structure at any point in time, is that right?
There would not.
Okay. And is it currently set up to accommodate 1 or more dogs?
Yes, it is.
Can you describe what alterations or anything to that structure that have been made?
Yes. So we put in a insulated garage door. We put in a new door with windows. Then we have completely insulated it and covered all of the walls in, or closed them in. We've also sealed the bottom with a special waterproofing tape, and then painted an epoxy over the floors for easy cleanup. And then there's individual kennels in there, and also like a little workbench with cabinetry to store things, and a water cooler, for their water.
And exhibit 7, is that the only door to access that structure?
Yes, the only one you can go in. The garage door has to be open from the inside.
And there's an electronic keypad on that, is that for added security?
Yes.
Okay. And then exhibit 8, is that the interior of the structure you just described?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I move for admission of exhibit 6, 7, and 8.
Okay, well, we will accept those into evidence.
Come back to those in just a second. A few others. that show the interior of the pasture you described in exhibits 1 through 5?
Yes.
All right, and what is this fence structure here?
So those are two separate kennels. Their main purpose is if I had to separate two girls that were not getting along. And another essential purpose is I cannot leave water out for them because raccoons or other small animals could get into it, and that's the number one introduction other than fecal matter for them to get parasites. So I always keep their water locked up when they're not actively in there.
Okay. And there's a structure behind or inside the fence. What's that?
Yes, so that was a run-in barn we had with a little side pack room. We have almost like when you're walking to a commercial freezer. We put that over the opening of the run-in barn for even when we had the cows and goats. So that is up, and then on the other side, we had sealed that up and painted that with epoxy and put a doggy door in too, for the same reason, somewhere they could go inside quickly if they needed to, and to get out of the weather or anything it might be, since we weren't using that space because it's behind the kennel.
And then I want to show you exhibit 10. Does this space show the interior of the basement in your residence?
Yes.
And I know it doesn't show all of it, but is that the area where you expect the litters of puppies to actually reside until they're old enough to be outside?
So we have another picture, it's actually the whelping room, and it's completely dark, kind of like a cave with no lights.
Okay.
That would
sorry
be,
to interrupt you. I'm going to show you exhibit 11. And then tell the board what exhibit 11 is and then come back to 10.
so that was another room we put in additional trim, often to seal everything so that we can clean up any messes. But that would be where we actually want Mom to whelp the puppies. I have a whelping box that can be set up and broken down, so we would have that set up for her initially, and then we'd break it down as the puppies get older and they're able to get around better. That would be the first room that we would use because we can control the lighting in there. So for the newborn puppy's eyes, they can't be exposed to light within a certain amount of time or it could cause damage. Same thing with loud noises. So we've kind of designed that to be like a cave. And then the outside area of the other picture he showed you is where I would be able to keep all of my supplies. The puppies would be able to run around and play with us. You'll see that we used a kennel panel to keep the dogs away from any structures in our basement that we don't want them to have access to, but that I can still get back there and use the countertop and cabinet space. And then with the imported puppies, because they can't be imported from Germany until they're 10 weeks, we went ahead and started crate training them right away to be able to sell them that way, and also for ease of us, they're old enough. So we had them each individually in their crates, same thing, so I know what they're eating, if one needs a medication and the other one doesn't. So we ended up using this area just because it was closer to our utility sink, and we don't have the same concerns like we do with younger puppies where we want them to be in a dark, quiet area.
Mr. Chair, I offer exhibits 10 and 11 in there.
And we'll go ahead and accept those into evidence.
And two more photos. Exhibit 12, does that show the gate onto your, the part of the property where you live? Because your property goes all the way out to the road. Does this show how to get into where you reside and where the business would be?
Yes.
Okay, and the green gate that's there, how does that open and close?
We have a garage remote controller that we use, and it also has a keypad with select codes.
I'm going to show you exhibit 13. Is that a copy of, excuse me, a photo of the keypad that's there for either you or anybody that you authorize into your property to use?
Yes.
And anytime that you aren't expecting either a package or a visitor or the board for a site visit, is that gate kept closed?
Yes.
I move for admission of exhibits 12 and 13.
And we will accept those into evidence.
All right, Mrs. Schaefer. How will your proposed business deal with dog waste?
We pick up and bag and remove all waste.
And you place it in residential trash hauling?
Yes,
And as far as you know and everything you've looked into, that's acceptable by the trash hauler, correct?
yes,
And you're also familiar with the fact that the health department has applicable regulations regarding outdoor disposal of animal waste, is that right?
yes,
And to your understanding, your property will meet or exceed all of those necessary requirements, correct?
yes.
Now, what steps, if any, have you taken or will you take to curtail barking of any dog on your property?
So with the order females, of course, they're trained, so it's giving a simple command. Most of them, they actually speak German as their first command. Of course, they understand no-till. But so we'll say a simple 9, and then it's kind of like an escalation from there. So I do have bark collars that I'm able to use, set different settings on. If they continue to bark, the vibration would get stronger. I have enough for every dog, as my mentor told me, because you never know. They're rechargeable, but I barely ever need to use them. Usually it's a friendly reminder for a day and she's done. Another thing that I have on the property is called a Bark Max silencer that I bought from a Good Life dog company. And that's something you can hang up on a structure or a tree, and it uses ultrasonic to deter barking. So it waits, if it's more than one bark or they're going back and forth, is then when the ultrasonic would come out, but it's not hearable to us, just to them.
Okay, so that device doesn't take any action unless and until there is one or more barks that trigger it?
Yes,
And then to your understanding, what does that device do?
it lets out an ultrasonic sound that they can hear and deters them from continuously barking.
Okay. All right. And have you seen, through a combination of what you described, their training, the commands, the collars if necessary, and this device, is there a lot of barking on your property?
No, I've heard from numerous people that they can't believe the size of the dogs because they didn't hear them before they got down to actually see them.
And when you say the dogs are trained with German commands, you're talking about the adult dogs, is that right?
Yes,
And are they trained at the time you take ownership of them?
they are. So I receive all of my dogs because the stage I am with my family, I wouldn't be able to actively train, put in all the time, and then to go to travel to these different shows. So I purchased them. They already have all 3 standards met by the German standards. So they're titled in work. They've received their breed survey, temperament testing, hips and elbows, and been shown.
And a number of the photos that are already in evidence will demonstrate this, but it's fair to say your property is surrounded almost on all sides by woods, correct? Okay. Do you believe that the proposed use is appropriate at your location and within the general area for what's going on in surrounding properties?
Yes,
And are you familiar or aware of any similar uses that have either currently or historically been in place on neighboring properties?
no. I understand that, right?
Did we have a conversation where there was a neighbor of yours who historically bred labs?
Yes,
Okay,
I had forgotten about that detail. I'm sorry.
okay,
I had discussed with a neighbor recently, and they let me know that their family had actually bred labs for hunting, and I had no idea.
and that was one of the directly adjoining properties?
Yes,
Okay. Now, let's talk about your driveway a bit. I know the board has all seen it since they were at the site visit on 2 occasions, as I understand it. Have you had to make any improvements to the driveway since you purchased the property?
yes.
Can you describe what you've had to do?
So for our driveway that just splits off and we share with the one neighbor, there were lots of continuous potholes and issues, so we brought in number 2 stones multiple times. Instead of paying to get it rolled out, we chose to drive over it for about a year and pack it down ourselves. Then, of course, we tried millings before, but the same potholes came right back. Then we waited approximately about a year after we had driven over it and put millings back over it to create a smoother surface. Any issues out there with potholes or anything, we've always addressed them and fixed them. We also had some issues with runoff, same thing, we had to, that's another reason why we got the number 2s, to hold the millings into place. So the driveway has been a continuous battle up until the past year or so. I think we finally figured out how to redo it and get the stone to stay in place. But the paved driveway that you drove in on, that we have more common access with the neighbors, that goes all the way out to the apron onto Route 91. My husband and I completely paid to pave that ourselves, and we had it beefed up to a thicker standard than just your normal standard from Schaefer's Paving.
And you paid $16,870 for that, didn't you?
Yes.
And did you have any contribution from any of your neighbors?
No.
Do you think the current state of your driveway is sufficient to accommodate the minimal traffic you believe would be associated with your business?
Yes.
And is there similar traffic on the driveway currently, whether it goes to your house or any of the other adjoining properties that just occurs day to day for deliveries, travel in and out, that kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay. And will your business generate any additional traffic specifically for deliveries or anything upkeep like that?
No.
Okay. So ultimately, what you're requesting of this board is permission to have a commercial kennel for up to 10 adult dogs. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And have you discussed your ambition with any of your neighbors?
Yes. So I've talked to some of them in person about it. When I was calling the county and discovering the steps I needed to do this, when they said commercial kennel, I thought it couldn't be right, so I kept calling and directing to different departments. So once I discovered it really would be called a commercial kennel, I was really nervous. So I talked with different neighbors about it, and really it's just having over the 2 litters is why I would have to go ahead and apply for it. They were very encouraging about it, so I decided to go ahead and pursue it. So once I did that, I let them know that, but I also drafted a letter to give to all of my neighbors. I gave it to all of my adjoining people, but then I also gave it to other people that share our driveway to let them know why I wanted to pursue this, that it was called a commercial kennel, but that I didn't actually plan on being a commercial kennel. That's just the way the definition by the county goes and what exactly I wanted to do. I also left a spot for feedback from them, whether it's positive or they had a comment that I could possibly improve. I did put in there to please give me any details, because it could be something really simple that I just didn't think of myself. That could be an easy fix, and I was willing to do that. And I did receive some good feedback from multiple neighbors.
Mr. Allman, am I on exhibit 12?
You are, yes, well, wait, you are on exhibit 14.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, I got extras. Okay. Ms. Chief, let me show you, what I'm gonna mark as exhibit 14. Now it's 1, 2, 3, 4 different letters that you received that are supportive from either directly adjoining or nearby property owners. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to show you also number 15, which we just got this morning. Is that one you also recently received from a directly adjoining or nearby neighbor?
Yes.
Okay. And you have gotten one written notice of opposition, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'll offer exhibits 14 and 15.
We'll go ahead and accept those into evidence.
I don't have any further questions for Ms. Schaefer at this time.
Okay, does anyone in the audience have any questions for Ms. Schaefer's testimony? And again, you'll have opportunity for your own testimony, but questions of her testimony. Go to the microphone and please state your name, address, occupation, and spell for the record your last name.
William Zepp, Z-E-P-P, 5710 Emory Road, Upper Co, Maryland, 21155. I'm retired, was 39 years, worked as a teacher and an administrator in the Baltimore County school system. Any other questions?
Nope, you're good. So
I'm not exactly sure how to proceed here. I have a number of questions. Some I guess Mrs. Schaefer can answer, and others probably are matters of county regulations. And
Mr. Zepp, and let me interrupt you. We have also, I'm assuming that Mr. Podolak is there to answer questions about, specific questions about the building and the site. Would that be correct, Mr. Podolak?
Yes.
Okay, so questions of her testimony, and then you'll have the opportunity to ask Mr. Podolak questions, technical questions about the actual design of what's happening there.
All right.
Okay?
Do I ask him in this hearing?
No, not, wait till after his testimony,
Okay.
okay?
Let me see, I guess this is a question I would need to ask him, but what structures are necessary for a commercial kennel? Is that something I would need to ask him?
Well, I think in her testimony, she outlined the buildings that are going to be used, but maybe that would be better suited to Mr. Podolak.
All right. Then again, a question about county regulations surrounding those structures, in terms of permitting, in terms of instruction, inspections, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, fencing. I guess those are questions he would answer also.
Those are questions, and Mr. Zepp, and I just want to be, I want to maybe clarify exactly what we're doing here as the Board of Zoning Appeals, as citizen planners. The request is for a conditional use for a commercial kennel. And the commercial kennel is defined in the code as you need to have a commercial kennel license if you breed more than 2 litters of pups a year on that property. So that's the reason for the commercial kennel. The actual site plan, which will be a requirement, will go before the technical review committee and then the planning commission, either as a simple plan, or I don't know if it'll be a simple plan or not, or whether it'll have to go before the planning commission. So those are issues that will be addressed at that point. So what we're dealing with is the conditional use and whether this is appropriate in this particular area, and determine whether this commercial kennel at this location would generate adverse effects above and beyond those normally associated with a kennel in any other zone, any other place in the ag zone.
All right, thank you for that, because most of these questions then would be concerning another review of her proposal.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So we're not approving buildings or the site plan today. It's the conditional use, it's the zoning certificate, it's the conditional use of this in the agricultural zone.
All right, then I guess I would reserve any comment I would make for a few more minutes until my testimony is there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and again, after Mr. Podolak's testimony, you can ask him questions on his actual testimony, and I'm sure he's gonna be a little more detailed in the actual site plan, because that's what he does for a living.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, board members, any questions of
I have a couple.
Ms. Schaefer's? Go ahead.
Ms. Schaefer, good morning. I've a couple of questions for you. Would it be reasonable, looking at the site plan, I believe that the animal enclosure area closest to your front gate is about 30 to 50 feet below your neighbor's property location, is that correct? In terms of height? So you can't see the neighbor from that animal pen, is that correct?
Yeah, I can see the top of their house.
Top of the house, okay. And not their backyard?
No.
Second question, in exhibits 3 and 4, there are structures in those pictures. Are those residences or barns or buildings of,
Could we see the exhibits?
Is that the one that had the red X? No, that was
it's
exhibit
exhibit 3 and 4.
They're on the questions.
My apologies, I didn't keep these in color.
I think they're probably this file, maybe. There's three.
Three.
And four.
Four. May I approach Mr. Caldwell?
Please.
This is exhibit 3.
Yes, there's a building back here.
Okay. Okay. And then exhibit 4.
Again, appears to be a building back here in the trees.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I was just curious as to how close they were, or if they were residences or outbuildings.
Sure. Okay. Alright, this exhibit 3, the building that Mr. Caldwell is inquiring about is here. Can you
This
describe what that is?
are our outdoor buildings or our sheds.
That's your building?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And then exhibit 4, the building Mr. Caldwell is asking about is white and through the trees here.
That is Ms. Denyon's house. And she-
Mary Daniel?
Yes,
She's one of the people who's indicated support of the application.
yes.
And when these trees are in bloom, can you see that property?
No, not at all. There's actually a big valley, and between us is actually multiple valleys. But no, you can't see in the summertime, but in the wintertime, yes.
Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Snyder, may I give these to you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Eckert?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Snyder? What's the total acreage of your property?
I believe it's 6.13, I'm sorry.
6.13 acres?
Yes.
And the fenced-in area is what acreage? Very close to that? Is the entire property fenced or a portion of the property fenced?
Just a portion of the property's fenced, so it's fencing that we had existing. It's a little less than half a square acre, or half an
Okay,
acre,
so-
sorry.
2.5 to 3 acres an estimate.
I'm sorry, what?
2.5 to 3 acres, would that be a fair estimate?
Of what's fenced in, or what's?
Yeah, of what's fenced in that you're gonna utilize with your dog?
No, it's a little less than half an acre.
A little bit, okay, half an acre. And what is the type of fencing that will be utilized to contain those dogs in that half an acre?
So we have wood fencing up with the big round post, and then
Mhm.
we have 4 boards up instead of your traditional 3. So we have the bottom 3 spaced closer together, and then we have the 4th one. It's a little bit larger of a gap, but not too large, because if they were to try to jump through, they wouldn't be able to make it.
Okay. Very good, that's all the questions I have. Everybody done? Okay, Mr. Lazariaga, you can call your next witness.
I will call Mr. Podolak. He
Thank you,
will
Ms.
come
Schaefer.
and join me. You're welcome to sit here if you want to sit down.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Podolak.
Mr. Podolak, could you state your name, address, and occupation, and spell for the record your last name?
Yes, my name is Peter Podolak, Podolak. I'm located at 147 East Main Street in Westminster, Maryland. I'm a board-certified civil engineer, registration number 19561, and I am representing the applicant, Lauren Schaefer.
And Mr. Lazariaga, we will accept him as an expert witness in those fields as he has testified before this board before.
That's great, Mr. Chair. I would offer him as an expert in land planning, engineering, and surveying. And if I may give
Yes, please.
Mr. Ullman a copy of his CV for the record.
Yes, please. And we will accept that into evidence.
Thank you. Mr. Podolak, you've got a copy of the plat associated with this application in front of you, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you just describe generally what does the plat show?
The plat represents a survey that we completed, and it depicts the limits and boundary of the property, all the improvements on the property. It has topography. It also shows the areas that are wooded, shows fences, septic area, well location, and basically everything that is on the property and that affects the property with respect to title.
And you either personally or under your supervision prepared this exhibit, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you heard Mrs. Schaefer indicate that the property was 6.131 acres. Is that something you verified?
Yes.
Right. And is this property located in the agricultural zone within the county?
Yes, zoned agricultural.
And you understand the pending application before the board is for a commercial kennel as defined by the county zoning ordinance, correct?
Yes.
And pursuant to that ordinance, there's effectively distance requirements associated with a commercial kennel, right?
That is correct.
Okay, and specifically in section 158.040, a commercial kennel has to be at least 200 feet away from any lot of less than 3 acres that is improved with an occupied dwelling, a recorded residential lot, or for which a construction permit has been issued. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And all of the adjoining lots that are shown on this plat are more than 3 acres. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And it also requires that the use be 300 feet away from any dwelling on an adjoining lot of more than 3 acres. Is that correct?
Did you say 200 or 300?
300.
300. That is correct. Although I was under the impression we were 200 because we were less than 10 dogs. 300 feet. Okay, 300 feet.
Okay. So it's required to be more than 300 feet away from a dwelling on an adjoining lot that's greater than 3 acres.
Correct.
Okay. Now, those distances are required to be doubled in the event that the application is for more than 10 adult dogs, correct?
That is correct.
But you've heard Ms. Schaefer testify she's only asking for a maximum of 10 adult dogs.
Correct.
Okay. And with all of the distances that you verified that are shown on this plat, does the proposed use meet or exceed those distance requirements?
Yes. The plat unfortunately just shows a 200-foot setback. However, if we added the extra 100 feet, which would be 2 more inches on this scale, we would find that there's only one property, one house that's close to the property boundary, and that's the house located at 5714 Emery Road.
Mr. Podolak, could you tell us who the owner is of that property?
And the owner of that property is Norman, well, the owner is Carol Ann Phillips. The previous owner was Norman Dryden, but he is deceased. So the tax invoice is being sent to Carol Ann Phillips.
Okay, thank you.
And the plat shows, Mr. Podolak, does it not, that the distance from the proposed use, and this is counting the house, the basement in which the puppies are kept, is at a minimum 368 feet from that residence, correct?
Correct. The house, where the puppies may be in the house, is 386 feet away, and the other other structures which may house the animals are even further away from that area. And there's a fenced-in animal pen at the northeastern corner of the property, and that too is greater than 300 feet away from the dwelling previously mentioned.
And any other dwelling that's even in the vicinity is more than 600 feet away from the boundaries of the proposed use, is that correct?
Correct. That there's really only one house that's visible if you're standing on the property, and that's the Denian property, Mary Denian. And that's 5710B, located on the drawing, Emery Road. And that's over 300 feet from the property boundary. That house, as Ms. Taylor testified, you can only see the top of it. The property's very well screened. I'd say over 50% of the property is wooded. So the trees provide both a screen, visible screen, and also would act to muffle any noise from the property.
Mr. Chair, if I might inquire, is there already a copy of the full plat in the
Yes.
the file? That's
It's
part of
already,
the
it's
record?
already in the record,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so for the agricultural zone, do you have any sort of opinion or testimony about if this lot is or is not unique?
There's, and we get into the legal question, Schultz versus Pritz. There's really nothing negative about this property that would preclude the use or exacerbate the use or make this use unacceptable. So in that regard, it would be the same as any other piece of property in the same zoning district. With that being said, the property has some positive factors that are important. The fact that a majority of it is wooded, provides the screen, the sound barrier is a big plus. Secondly, there's infrastructure on the property which would aid for this use. There's an animal pen already fenced off. There's barns, sheds, and other areas that could be used for this use.
Let's stick for the moment with the lot size, shape, that type of thing. The plat that's in the record indicates one of the immediate adjoining properties is 65.082 acres, so that's substantially larger. All of the other adjoiners, are they roughly the same size, or a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller?
Yes. Some are a little bit larger, some are bigger, but as you had said, that they're all 3 acres or larger. And so there's significant distance between the dwellings.
And the topography of the surrounding lots is or is not roughly similar to the one on the Schaefer property?
It's all similar.
Okay.
You know.
Okay, and the proposed location, you indicated you think approximately half of it is wooded. Is that typically from a land planning perspective considered to be an adequate buffer for any improvements or noise?
Yes.
And in which sides of the property are surrounded by a wooded area?
Roughly half the property to the north is wooded, so the woods right behind the house is, for the most part, a cleared area, yard. And then where the animal pen is in the northeast corner is cleared, but there's a little bit of woods that comes through there. The rest of the property, for the most part, is all wooded, with the exception of where the improvements are. The wooded areas are depicted on green on the zoning plat. So the woods, for the most part, starts midway at the property line on the north side, continues counterclockwise, for the most part, all the way around the perimeter of the property, up into the driveway, where the driveway forks once it's reaches the subject property.
Now, the proposed use on the location is described on the plat. Can you say with any level of confidence what, if any, portions of it will be visible from adjoining property owners' lots?
Yes, I mean, frankly, I believe the only portion of the property that you would see from any house would more than likely be 5710B, but I've never been on that property, so I don't know how much of the property you can see. I know from the property, looking at the house, you can see the top of the house. Standing at the house and looking to the south, you cannot see the house at 5714, although that is the closest dwelling to this property.
Having been recognized as an expert in land planning, do you have an opinion as to whether or not this location is an appropriate area for a commercial kennel as proposed?
I believe it's appropriate. I understand I've been involved in other kennels, conditional use cases, and this is not your traditional kennel where someone's going to be breeding dogs. I believe when you take a dog out of its environment and you bring it into an area for a week or so, that the dog gets spooked, barks, makes noise, whines, and whatever. This really isn't the case here. Here, where the applicant is looking to breed dogs. So essentially, the dogs live with her, she takes care of the dogs. The dogs are familiar with the surrounding, so I don't anticipate the type of noise from this particular kennel that you would have with a traditional boarding kennel. Furthermore, the breeding and the number of dogs, that number is going to be probably puppies for the most part. And so, we say 10 dogs here. I don't think we're going to have 10 adult dogs running around barking. I think what we would have would be small litters that would eventually be broken up, sold. And I don't see any real issues here or any conditions that I would say are detrimental for this particular use.
Let me ask you perhaps a little bit more specifically. Being familiar with the site and the surrounding area, in your expert opinion, would the proposed use create any dangerous traffic conditions or jeopardize the lives or property of anybody nearby?
No. We've heard from testimony from Ms. Schaefer that basically the only customers that will come to the site will, for the most part, be to either pick up, buy the dog, or meet the dog. So we're talking about a low traffic generating use.
And in your expert opinion, does the proposed use at this location present an adverse effect above and beyond those inherently associated with the same use, regardless of its location within the zoning scheme?
No.
And I don't know if you had an opportunity to review the comments from Ms. Eisenberg, but take a look at what I'm showing you. That's part of the record in this case.
Yes, no, I have not seen this.
So in your expert opinion, Is the proposed use consistent with the orderly growth and development of the community?
Yes.
And is the proposed use consistent with the zoning ordinance and the master plan as amended for the county?
Yes.
Don't have anything further for Mr. Podolak.
Okay, does anyone in the audience have any questions of Mr. Podolak's testimony? Mr. Zepp, go to the microphone, please.
Thank you. Let me preface my remarks by saying I'm a firm believer in the fact that a person's property ought to be able to be used as they see fit. And to that extent, that's the reason why zoning is in place, so that the county and the overall community can also determine if that is correct usage there. Mr. Kodalak, have you been to the property physically?
Yes.
Your testimony was that only one house can be seen from their house, is that correct?
Yes, standing, in the general curtilage area of their house.
You then did not look at my house. I can see theirs and they can see mine, and the person beside me, Mr. Burnside, his house can also be seen, as well as the one that you named 5714, Mrs. Phillips' house. So there are 3 houses that can be seen.
Mr. Bale, for purposes of the record, I'm going to note an objection. I think Mr. Zepp is certainly going to have the opportunity to testify, but he did not ask a question.
Yeah, and Mr. Zepp, I don't mean to cut you off, but Mr. Zuriaga makes a very good point. You will have, at the conclusion of him calling witnesses, you will have the opportunity to go ahead and provide testimony of your own, subject to cross-examination, same as they were. And that would probably be more appropriate. This is like Jeopardy. You have to, you should form everything as a question to Mr. Podolak.
All right, well, then I have 2.
Okay, and that's fine. And listen,
I appreciate you helping me through that.
and I don't hold it against you because I've been on this board quite a few years, and the process is still confusing to even me. So go ahead. It's quasi-judicial. That's why it's confusing.
Then the question that I would have for you, Mr. Kodalak, do the present buildings and the information that Mr. Schaefer has given you meet the definition for a commercial kennel?
Yes. Insofar as, the property is the property. I'm sure that there may be some additional improvements that may be made, but my understanding of the operations is that the dogs are kept in the house, or they may be housed in another building in the future. That the general operation would be if the dog goes to the bathroom, that they pick up the debris, and they would dispose of it as solid waste. The bottom line is that if there's adequate room, and there's some fenced-in areas that allow these dogs to be penned in. As I said, they may decide to do some additional fencing, but there's adequate room, certainly, for this type of operation.
All right, then the question that I would have is, will new buildings be required in order for her to have at least 10 adults?
I don't believe so. I think there's sufficient infrastructure on the property to house these animals. And nothing is proposed at this point in time.
So, in your opinion, she could contain 10 adults in the house and in a less than quarter acre, or less than half acre paddock?
Objection. I know this is quasi-judicial. I don't think that's what Mr. Podolak testified to. He said there's no further improvements proposed at this time, and he thinks the property is suited.
All right, I'll let the,
And that's what was testified to.
all right, and I'll let the commission then decide on that. Thank you.
Okay.
And for the record, we would be subject to some type of site development plan. And at the site development plan, that is where issues such as traffic, issues such as sewage disposal, and stormwater management, and other environmental regulations, that's where everything would be addressed.
And that was to be my follow-up question, so you've answered that. All the county requirements for buildings, building permits, inspections, all that would be taken care
It
of.
would be taken care of.
Thank you.
Site development phase.
Okay. Board members, any questions of Mr. Podolak?
None.
My question to you, Mr. Podolak, is are there any additional buildings being proposed in this process?
Not at this point in time.
Okay, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
just wanted to reiterate that, so that's, and if there were, it would be subject to either a modified site plan or a full site plan before the planning commission.
Correct. We would be subject to a building permit, and that would more than likely trigger an additional site plan, or at least depending on the size of the building and the type of the building, it may not require a full site development plan.
But a modified site plan.
But at least a drawing to accompany the building permit.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Mr. Luzuriaga, any other witnesses?
No, not at this time unless we need to put on rebuttal evidence. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, Mr. Zepp, would you like to present your evidence? You don't have to form it in a question now. You can go ahead and present evidence if you would like. So you can speak for or against, and then stay there at the microphone, and we will quiz you on your testimony.
Just one thing, and that is, she testifies that the dogs cannot be heard, and she has a barking control ultrasonic device. Just yesterday, around 4 o'clock, the dogs were out. I thought perhaps they were in a fight, and quite a few barked. I'm a quarter mile away. Quite a loud noise. And that occurs from time to time. Secondary to that is from time to time her dogs have gotten loose, have been over at my house, have been out to my daughter's house, she's here today but doesn't care to testify, and have actually one of them walked or was out a half a mile away and hit on the road by a vehicle. So in terms of her ability to control her animals, I have some suspicion that it's less than adequate. And that would be my only testimony.
Okay, just stay right there. Mr. Luzuriaga, any?
No, I don't have any questions of Mr. Zepp.
Okay. Board members, any questions of Mr. Zepp? No, thank you, Mr. Zepp.
Thank you.
Okay. That's everybody that raised their hand and took the oath. So presentation of testimony and evidence is now closed and summations are in order. Mr. Luzuriaga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board members, thank you for your time this morning. You've heard a prima facie case that this falls within the county code's definition of a commercial kennel. You've heard evidence that I think is, obviously I am her advocate, but I think it's impressive how much thought, effort, and expense that Ms. Schaefer and her family have put into this venture that they plan to bring to the county. And your task is to decide, does it meet Schultz versus Pritz? Is there anything worse at this location than anywhere else in the zone? And there's been no testimony to suggest that. So the only other threshold this board needs to consider, aside from those in the code, does it meet the distance requirements? And we have uncontradicted expert testimony that it does, so that makes this a presumed appropriate use. So we request that you grant the application for a commercial kennel for 10 or fewer adult dogs in this location. Thank you.
Okay. The hearing and record of this case is now closed, and in accordance with the Open Meeting Acts of Maryland, the board will now consider the case. Mr. Simmons.
Thank you for calling on me. I want to commend Mr. Lazzariaga, but most especially Mrs. Schaefer, for your testimony, your preparation, your thoroughness. If I ever have a dog, I'll come to you. If that's a ratification of what I've heard. There's no question in my mind that you more than met the standard for conditional use for a commercial kennel. I intend to vote to approve it. Plain and simple.
Mr. Caldwell.
It's clear that the applicant has gone above and beyond to prepare for breeding dogs. It's quite exceptional. I've actually learned quite a bit from your testimony. Thank you for that. I intend to approve this application.
Ms. Eckert.
I was impressed as well, and really have nothing else to add, and I intend to vote in favor of this.
Mr. Snyder.
Ironically, the one, excuse my voice, I have laryngitis. Ironically, the one question I was going to ask and didn't was, have the dogs ever gotten out, and has that become a problem? And notwithstanding, dogs get out, cattle get out, it does happen. I don't have any problem with the application. I think it was well presented. I think you're very committed to the effort. And with that said, I think you would equally be committed to ensure that your dog stays secure, looking going forward, whether that's enhancements to your fence or whatever the case may be. So with that said, I support the
So the request that was before us today was for conditional use of a commercial kennel. And as we've become all too familiar, we're very aware of what the commercial kennel definition is, and it's if you're breeding more than 2 litters of pups per year. And again, you went with 10 dogs as opposed to more than 10 dogs, put you in a little bit different category. We're charged with determining whether this commercial kennel at this location would generate adverse effects above and beyond those normally associated with kennels in other zones. That's the Schultz v. Pritz standards, and they're met in this case today. There's no additional buildings that was testified to. It meets all the setbacks for the 10 dogs. It would have been more if it was 11 dogs. Bark collars can be utilized, and it was testified that there was a little ruckus going on at 4 o'clock or so yesterday. But you can't have the bark collars on, and you shouldn't have the bark collars on the dogs 24/7. So I'm assuming that was addressed yesterday. I think one of the things that was very compelling in the testimony was the distinction between a boarding kennel and a breeding kennel. Mr. Podolak articulated that, and I thought that was very interesting because these dogs are in a familiar environment all the time, as opposed to a boarding kennel where dogs are out of their environment and maybe a little more vocal than they would normally be. And I think that's a distinction that this board needs to, or should take into consideration in their deliberations. And it's my experience that a boarding kennel would be a little rowdier than a breeding kennel. So with that, board, do we have a motion?
Case number 6367, I make the motion to approve the request for conditional use for a commercial kennel.
Seconded.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Our oral decision will become final upon a written decision which will be issued within 30 days unless otherwise extended by this board. The board's decision may be appealed by filing a petition for judicial review with the clerk of the circuit court for Carroll County in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 200, Title 7 of the Maryland Rules of Procedure. The appeal must be filed within 30 days of the date of this board's written decision. Thank you very much, and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you, board members.